Hello my dear students, today I will demonstrate step by step from basics to the advanced concepts about the cranial nerve and their nuclei. This lecture is connected with my future lectures about the head and neck, nerve supply and the gross anatomy of the cranial nerves. These three lectures are the nutshell of whole neuroanatomy and will guide you in the long run. You can study, you can understand any chapter of the nervous system if you have got good command over these fundamental details. After this lecture, I'll soon upload my unique content about the head and neck nerve supply. In one sitting, you'll complete your head and neck nerve supply. And then I will upload the cross anatomy of the cranial nerves. And then I'll move to the neuroanatomy lectures about the spinal cord ascending and descending tracts. So let's start this lecture now.
When you will watch these two lectures, we will get to know that nervous system has got two categories: voluntary nervous system or the somatic nervous system, and the involuntary nervous system, that is the nervous system of the visceral nervous system. Each of these two divisions has got a motor component and a sensory component. The sensory component is known as the afferent component and motor component is known as the efferent component. So we will have a afferent component and an efferent component. These two divisions are further divided into a general category and a special category. The functions can be general when they are present in the whole body. The functions will be special when they are present only in the cranial region. For example, we have got taste and vision and hearing and balance in the cranial region. So these will be labeled as special components or the special functions. So let's name these components. If they are general, we'll name this component as general somatic afferent. And we'll name this component as general somatic efferent. This component will be named as general visceral afferent. And this component will be named as general visceral efferent. And if these components are special, we'll say that this is special somatic afferent, this is special somatic efferent, this is special visceral afferent, and this is special visceral efferent. Note down that we have got no example of the special somatic efferent in the human body. So we'll say that we have got 4 general functions and we have got 3 special functions. Look at here, if we draw a line here, we can say that this is the cranial region and this is the rest of the body. For supply of the cranial region, we have got 12 cranial nerves, and for supply of rest of body, we have got 31 pair of the spinal nerves. General components are those components that are present throughout the body. So they will be present in the cranial region and they will be present in the rest of the body. So in the cranial region, these 4 functions will be performed by 12 cranial nerves, and rest of the body, these 4 functions will be performed by 31 pair of the spinal nerves. Now the special functions that are only present in the cranial region, these are the special visceral afferent, these are the special somatic afferent, and these are the special visceral efferent. These 3 special components are present in the cranial region only and will be served by the cranial nerves. So here we can make a point that cranial nerve has got general functions as well as the special functions in the cranial region of the body, and spinal nerve has got only the general functions for the rest of the body. Now look at here, these are the components of the cranial nerves and I will summarize the cranial nerves that perform these functions. First of all, general somatic afferent component, that is about the general sensations carried from the skin. The major nerve that performs this function in head and face area is the trigeminal nerve, 5th cranial nerve. Minor role is also played by 7, 9 and 10th cranial nerve. Next is the general somatic efferent, that is about the voluntary effectors, voluntary skeletal muscles. In the head and face area, we have got voluntary skeletal muscles in 2 areas. One is the tongue, the muscle that move the tongue, and other is the muscle that move the eyeball, extraocular muscles. For the muscles of tongue, we have got cranial nerve number 12, and for the extraocular muscles, we have got cranial nerve number 3, 4 and 6. That is the general visual afferent component, that is about the mucosa that informs the brain about the internal environment. For this, we have got cranial nerve number 9 and 10. Next is the general visual efferent component. This component is about the involuntary effector that includes the smooth muscle, and the glands. For this, we've got cranial nerve number 3, 7, 9, and 10. And this cranial nerve will perform only the parasympathetic function. And now the special functions of the cranial nerves. First of all, the special somatic afferent. Special somatic afferent mean it's a sensory component of special nature coming from the somatic origin, coming from the ectoderm. And these special sensations are the sensation of vision and the hearing along with balance. For vision, we have got cranial nerve number 2, that is the optic nerve, and for balance, we have got the 8th cranial nerve, that is the vestibulocochlear nerve. Next is the special somatic efferent component, and this component doesn't exist in the human body. Next is the special visual afferent component. This is special sensory component of visual in region. The special sensation that will involve the mucosa. Keep in mind, special sensation that involve the mucosa come under the heading of the special visual afferent, and special sensation that involve the somata ectoderm will come under the heading of special somatic afferent. So the taste and smell are the sensations that are carried from the mucosa. Taste from the mucosa of the tongue and smell from the mucosa of the nasal cavity. For taste, we have got cranial nerve number 7, 9, and 10. And for smell, we have got first cranial nerve, that is the olfactory nerve. Last is the special visual efferent component. These are special effectors, special muscles that are not truly voluntary. These special effectors are derived from the branchial arches. We have got 5 branchial arches: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. There is no fifth arch. And the cranial nerve that supply these muscles are the cranial nerve number 5 for first arch, 7 for second arch, 9 for third arch, and 10 for the arch number 4 and 6. So in this table, note down the nerves that perform these functions. Now I'll talk about the neuronal composition of the cranial nerve component. How many neurons are required for each component starting from its origin till the destination. First, I'll talk about this diagram. Look at here. This is the brainstem. This one is the thalamus. And this is the cerebral cortex. Here we have got the central sulcus. Anterior to it is the frontal lobe. And posterior to it is the parietal lobe. This one is the pericentral sulcus. And this one is the post-central sulcus. This gyrus belongs to the frontal lobe and this gyrus belongs to the parietal lobe. This gyrus is known as the pericentral gyrus. This gyrus is known as the post-central gyrus. This is the motor cortex, also known as the Brodmann area, core 6. And post-central gyrus is the sensory cortex, also known as the Brodmann area 312. Now I'll talk about the neuronal composition of the cranial nerve components. First, the general somatic afferent component that deals with skin of the face and head. General visual afferent component that deals with receptors in the mucosa of the head and face area. Then the special visual afferent component that deals with the taste sensations carried from the tongue. All these three components composition is the same. They consist of 3 neurons: the first order neuron, second order neuron, and the third order neuron. First order neuron, like in the spinal cord, is pseudojunipolar neuron with a cell body in the center and has got 2 processes, a peripheral process and a central process. Peripheral process is carrying information from the receptor, and central process gets entry into the brain, that is the brainstem. Here it will synapse with the second order neuronal cell body. The second order neuron will ascend and will reach the thalamus, where it will synapse with third order neuron, and third order neuron is the last neuron. It will ascend and will reach the destination, that is the post-central gyrus of the parietal lobe, also known as the Brodmann area 312. This is the first order neuron, this is the second order neuron, and this is the third order neuron. Now I will briefly talk about the neuronal cell bodies. This first order neuron cell body is outside the central nervous system, and the collection of the neuronal cell bodies outside the central nervous system without synapse is known as the false ganglia. So this is a sensory false ganglia. the second order neuronal cell body that is present in the brain stem. This neuronal cell body will be named and will be known as the cranial nerve nuclei. I will explain shortly. Keep in mind the neuronal cell bodies that are present in the brainstem are generally known as the nuclei of the cranial nerves. Now the third order neuronal cell body, look at here, that is present in the thalamus, the last neuron of the afferent components. Thalamus is known as the relay station of all the sensory modalities. What does this mean? This means that all the sensations of the human body, whether carried by the cranial nerves, whether carried by the spinal nerves, all the sensations except the olfactions, the neurons has to reach the thalamus. They will synapse here. The lost neuronal cell body will always be present in the thalamus and will reach the destination in the cerebral cortex. So we can say that. So in this way, thalamus will become the relay station of all the sensory modalities except the olfaction. Now I'll talk about the motor components. First, the general somatic efferent component that deals with the voluntary skeletal muscles of the head and face area. Then the special visceral efferent component that deals with the muscles of the brachial arch, special muscles. These two components have got similar composition. They consist of two neurons, the upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron. The cell body of the upper motor neuron is present in the cerebral hemisphere. Keep in mind, motor components will start in the cerebral hemisphere and sensory component will end in the cerebral hemisphere. So from here, the axon will descend and will reach the brain stem. Here it will synapse with second neuron, that is the lower motor neuron, and the lower motor neuron will come out of the brain, will reach the destination, that is the muscle of the general somatic efferent component and the special visceral efferent component. The lower motor neuron cell body, you can see, is present in the brain stem, and this will be named as the nuclei, and this will be the motor nuclei of those nerves that will deal with general somatic efferent and the special visual efferent functions. I will explain shortly about those nerves. So this neuron will be labeled as the upper motor neuron, and this neuron that is the target will be labeled as the lower motor neuron. Now coming to the last component that I will explain here is the general visceral efferent component. General visceral efferent component is a motor component for the involuntary effectors. Involuntary effectors are the smooth muscle and the glands. This component consists of two neurons known as the preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic neurons. The neuronal cell body of the preganglionic neuron is present in the brain stem. From here, this neuron will come out of the brain and will synapse with a second neuron outside the central nervous system. So we will have a neuronal cell body collection outside the central nervous system. This will be named as the ganglia, and the ganglia is true ganglia. So we will have a neuron before the ganglia and we will have a neuron after the ganglia. This neuron is the preganglionic neuron and this neuron is the postganglionic neuron. The postganglionic neuron will reach the target, and target is the viscera, that is the smooth muscle and glands of the head and face area. Now the neuronal cell body of the preganglionic neuron that is present in the brain stem will be labeled as the nuclei, and this will be the cranial nerve nuclei of those nerves that deal with the function of the general visual efferent component. So in the end, keep in mind two important facts. Number one, all the cell bodies of these neurons that are present in the brain stem, these neurons are generally referred to as the cranial nerve nuclei of these functional components. So this is a general rule that we consider these neuronal cell bodies as the nuclei. Second important fact is about the upper motor neuron. This neuron is known as the corticonuclear fiber. Why? Because the origin of the upper motor neuron is in the cortex and the termination is a nuclei in the brainstem. That's why this fiber is known as corticonuclear fiber, also known as corticobulbar fiber. The general somatic afferent component. This component deals with the skin of the face and the scalp. The main nerve that performs this function, that deals with all of the skin of the face and the scalp, is the trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve number 5. This is the main nerve that will perform this function. And this function is performed by three neurons. First neuron is pseudojunipolar outside the central nervous system with a peripheral process and with a central process that goes inside the brainstem and synapse with the second order neuron. In the brainstem, this second order neuron will be known as the nuclei of the cranial nerve. The second order neuronal cell bodies in the brainstem collect in the form of a column. So this nucleus is present like a column in the brainstem. This nucleus has got a part in the midbrain, has got a part in the pons, and has got a part in the medulla. In the midbrain, the part of the nucleus is known as the mesencephalic nucleus. In the pons, the part of the nucleus is known as the main sensory nucleus. In the medulla, the part of the nucleus is known as the spinal trigeminal nucleus. The second order neuron from here will ascend and will synapse with third order neuron in the thalamus, and third order neuron will reach the destination, that is the sensory cortex of the parietal lobe. Other than the cranial nerve number 5, the genosomatic afferent function is also performed by cranial nerve number 7, 9 and 10. They have got very minor role. They supply a small part of the skin over the external ear and the external acoustic meatus. The composition of the neuron is same. First order neuron is a pseudojunipolar neuron with a peripheral process and with a central process. The peripheral process will be present in the cranial nerve number 7, 9 and 10, and the central process will get access inside the brain, and in the brainstem it will follow the neurons of the fifth cranial nerve. It will synapse inside the neuronal cell bodies present in these three nuclei, and second order neuron will reach the thalamus, will synapse with third order neuron, and third order neuron will reach the destination, that is the sensory cortex of the parietal lobe. In this way, we can say that mesencephalic nucleus, main sensory nucleus, and spinal trigeminal nucleus are also the nucleus of the 7th, 9th, and 10th cranial nerve. These nuclei are mainly the nuclei of the trigeminal nerve, but these are shared by 7th, 9th, and 10th cranial nerve. Now I'll talk about the cranial nerve and nuclei that form general visual afferent component and special visual afferent component. General visual afferent component of the cranial region is about the mucosa of the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. And this function of the general visual afferent component is performed by cranial nerve number 9 and 10. While the special visual afferent component is about the taste sensations that are carried from the mucosa of the tongue, and this function is performed by cranial nerve number 7, 9 and 10. The neuronal composition of these two components is same. First neuron is a pseudojunipolar neuron with a peripheral process and a central process. Pseudojunipolar neuron with a peripheral process and a central process that gains access inside the brainstem. In the brainstem, this central process will synapse with the second order neuron, and this second order neuron in the brainstem will be named as the nuclei. The general visual afferent nuclei is known as the solitary nucleus, while the special visual afferent nucleus is known as the gustatory nucleus. And from here, the second order neuron will reach the thalamus. It will synapse with third order neuron in the thalamus, and third order neuron will reach the sensory cortex parietal lobe. So I will repeat, the general visual afferent function is performed by cranial nerve number 9 and 10, and the nucleus is common, that is the solitary nucleus, while the special visual afferent component about the taste is performed by cranial nerve number 7, 9 and 10, and the nucleus is common, that is the gustatory nucleus. And now the cranial nerves and nuclei that deal the general somatic afferent component. These cranial nerves are 3, 4, 6 and 12. Genosomatic efferent component is about the voluntary skeletal muscles, and in case of the cranial region, voluntary skeletal muscles are extraocular muscles and the muscles of the tongue. Extraocular muscles are supplied by nerve number 3, 4, 6, and the muscles of the tongue are supplied by cranial nerve number 12. As you know that general somatic efferent component consists of two neurons, upper motor neuron and a lower motor neuron. The upper motor neuron is present in the motor cortex here, and from here it will descend and it will reach the brainstem. Here it will synapse with the lower motor neuron. This low motor neuron will be known as the nucleus as it is in the brainstem. For supplying extraocular muscles, we have got three cranial nerves. So we will have three nuclei in the brainstem. Now these low motor neuron will reach the destination, and destination is the extraocular muscles. These are the nuclei. Nuclei of the third cranial nerve is known as the oculomotor nucleus, and nuclei of the fourth cranial nerve is known as the trochlear nucleus, and nucleus of the sixth cranial nerve is known as the abducent nucleus. Likewise, for the muscles of the tongue, we have got a motor neuron that is present in the frontal lobe motor cortex. It will descend downwards in the brainstem, and here it will synapse with the low motor neuron. This low motor neuron is now the nucleus. This is 12th cranial nerve nucleus and is known as the hypoglossal nucleus. And this low motor neuron will reach the destination, that is the muscles of the tongue. So note down general somatic efferent component. The function is performed by cranial nerve number 3, 4, 6 and 12, and the nuclei are the oculomotor nucleus, trochlear nucleus, abducent nucleus and the hypoglossal nucleus. Now I'll talk about the cranial nerves and nuclei that form the special visual efferent component. These cranial nerves are cranial nerve number 5, 7, 9 and 10. The special visual efferent component is about the special muscles of the brachial arches or the pharyngeal arches. We've got four brachial arches. Arch 1 give rise to the muscles of mastication, arch 2 give rise to the muscles of facial expression, and arch 3, 4 and 6, there is no fifth arch, give rise to the muscles of the soft palate, muscles of the pharynx and muscles of the larynx. Each of the brachial arch muscles are supplied by their own cranial nerve. Arch 1 is supplied by the 5th cranial nerve, trigeminal nerve. Arch 2 is supplied by the 7th cranial nerve, that is the facial nerve. Arch 3 is supplied by 9th cranial nerve, and arch 4 and arch 6 muscles are supplied by the 10th cranial nerve, vagus nerve. The special visual efferent component is similar to the general somatic efferent component. It has got same neurons. Upper motor neuron that is present in the frontal lobe motor cortex. It will descend downward and will reach the brainstem, where it will synapse with the second neuron, that is the low motor neuron. The upper motor neuron will synapse with the low motor neuron and we will get the nuclei. The nucleus for the fifth cranial nerve is known as the masticatory nucleus, and low motor neuron will supply the muscles of the mastication. The nucleus of the seventh cranial nerve is known as the facial nucleus, a motor nucleus, and the low motor neuron will supply the muscles of the facial expression. And then for the ninth cranial nerve and 10th cranial nerve, we have got a common nucleus that is known as the nucleus ambiguous. And from here, the low motor neurons will move towards the destination, that is the muscles of the soft palate, muscles of the pharynx, and the muscles of the larynx. So I will repeat, special visual efferent component is about the special muscles of the brachial arches, arch 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6, and the cranial nerves are the 5th, 7th, 9th and 10th, and the nucleus are the masticatory nucleus, facial nucleus and the nucleus ambiguous. We can say special visual efferent component has got three nucleus in the brainstem: masticatory nucleus, facial nucleus and the nucleus ambiguous. Now I'll talk about the cranial nerves and nuclei that deal with the general visual efferent component. These cranial nerves are cranial nerve number 3, 7, 9 and 10. The general visual efferent component deals with the involuntary effectors, that is the viscera, which include glands, smooth muscle and the cardiac muscle. General visual efferent component has got two divisions, a sympathetic division and a parasympathetic division. Cranial nerve will always contribute to the parasympathetic division of the general visual efferent component of the autonomic nervous system. General visual efferent component consists of two neurons, a preganglionic neuron and a postganglionic neuron. The preganglionic neuron is present in the brainstem. So this will be the nuclei of the cranial nerves. The preganglionic neuron that is related with the third cranial nerve is known as the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. And the preganglionic neuron related with the seventh cranial nerve is known as the superior salivatory nucleus. And preganglionic neuron related with the ninth cranial nerve is known as the inferior salivatory nucleus. And the preganglionic neuron of the vagus nerve is known as the dorsal vagus nucleus. The preganglionic neuron will come out of the brain and will synapse with the postganglionic neuron outside the central nervous system. So these are the ganglia. The ganglia related with the third cranial nerve is known as the ciliary ganglia. This is the ciliary ganglia. And ganglia related with seventh cranial nerve, there are two ganglia related with the seventh cranial nerve. One is the pterygopalatine ganglia and second is the submandibular ganglia. Ganglia related with ninth cranial nerve is known as the otic ganglia. The target of the postganglionic neurons from the ciliary ganglia is the viscera of the eyeball. The eyeball has got viscera, yes, it has got smooth muscle like sphincter pupillary and dilator pupillary, and it has got gland that secrete the fluid. The target of the postganglionic neurons from submandibular ganglia is submandibular gland and the sublingual salivary gland. The target of the postganglionic neurons from the otic ganglia is the parotid gland. Now, note down all the viscera that is not supplied by ciliary ganglia, that is not supplied by submandibular ganglia, that is not supplied by otic ganglia. For example, the lacrimal gland, for example, the minor salivary gland present in the oral cavity, minor salivary gland present in the nasal cavity, minor salivary gland present in the pharynx. All these remaining viscera will be supplied by pterygopalatine ganglia. The preganglion neuron of the dorsal vagus nucleus will come out of the brain and will exit the cranial region as well, because vagus nerve has got no target or viscera in the cranial region. Its target is the thorax viscera. We have cardiac muscle, heart, and we have lungs in the thorax. Its target is the foregut that is present in the abdomen and the midgut that is present in the abdomen. Here it will synapse with the second neuron, that is the postganglionic neuron, and will supply the target. So we will have ganglia here related with the vagus nerve. Note down, all these ganglia are the parasympathetic ganglia, and we can categorize these into the cranial parasympathetic ganglia and the peripheral parasympathetic ganglia. Cranial parasympathetic ganglia can be numbered, there are four: ciliary ganglia, pterygopalatine ganglia, submandibular ganglia, and otic ganglia. While the peripheral parasympathetic ganglia is outside the cranial region and is related with the vagus nerve, and their number cannot be counted. They are numerous. Look at here, I'll demonstrate a crucial information about the geniosomatic afferent and the geniospastic afferent functions. You know, geniosomatic afferent is about the genus sensations carried from the skin of the head and face area, and this function is mainly performed by the trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal means three nerves: ophthalmic, maxillary, and the mandibular nerves. So the trigeminal nerve is the main nerve that performs the function of the geniosomatic afferent. But important thing is that geniosomatic afferent kind of sensations like heat, cold, touch, pain are also present in the nasal cavity and the oral cavity. So we have got geniosomatic afferent function in the nasal cavity as well as the oral cavity, and this function is performed by the same fifth cranial nerve, trigeminal nerve. The general afferent component starts at the level of the pharynx, that is the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. After this, the general afferent component will continue into the trachea and the esophagus. Look at here, these are the muscles present in the cranial region, and majority of the students are confused what are the muscles that will be under the heading of the geniosomatic efferent and what are the muscles that will come under the special visual efferent component. These are the muscles of mastication, these are the muscles of facial expression, and these are the muscles of deglutition, involve the muscles of the palate, muscles of the pharynx, and muscles of the larynx. And these are the muscles of tongue for moving our tongue, and these are extraocular muscles that move our eyeball. Among these muscles, only the muscles of the tongue and the extraocular muscles are the muscles of the general somatic efferent component. All other muscles of mastication, facial expression, and deglutition are the muscles of the special visceral efferent component. But what is the difference between these two groups? Keep in mind there are two differences. One is the difference of the action and other is the difference of the origin, difference of the development. The difference of action is that muscles of tongue and the extraocular muscles, these are truly voluntary muscles, and their action will be investigated on the day of judgment. You will be asked how you use your tongue and how you use your eyes. And difference of development or difference of origin is that muscles of tongue and muscles of the eyeball, extraocular muscles, are derived from somatopyloric mesoderm. So they are truly the skeletal muscles, while the mastication muscles, the facial expression muscles, the muscles of deglutition that includes palate, pharynx and the laryngeal muscles and the upper esophageal muscles. These muscles are derived from brachial arches, and brachial arches are derived from mesenchyme and neural cell. That's why these muscles are labeled as special visceral efferent muscles of brachial arches. Now we'll summarize this discussion into component, cranial nerve and the nuclei. Look at here. For genusmatic afferent component, the nuclei are the spinal trigeminal nucleus, main sensory nucleus and the mesencephalic nucleus. These nuclei are the nuclei of the trigeminal nerve, that is the fifth cranial nerve, and these nuclei are also related with the genusmatic afferent function of cranial nerve numbers 7, 9 and 10. They will also serve these nerves. For genovisceral afferent component, the nucleus is the solitary nucleus and the cranial nerves are 9 and 10. Special visceral afferent component is about the taste and is about the smell. For taste, we have got the gustatory nucleus and cranial nerves are the 7, 9 and 10. And for smell, the cranial nerve is the first cranial nerve and the nucleus is known as the bipolar neurons. Next comes the motor component, genusmatic efferent component. For this, we have got the cranial nerve number 3, 4, 6 and 12. Oculomotor nucleus belongs to third cranial nerve, trochlear nucleus belongs to fourth cranial nerve, abducent nucleus belongs to sixth cranial nerve, and hypoglossal nucleus belongs to 12th cranial nerves. Spatial visceral efferent component. The cranial nerves are the 5, 7, 9 and 10. Masticatory nucleus belongs to 5th cranial nerve, facial nucleus belongs to the 7th cranial nerve, and nucleus ambiguous belongs to the 9th and 10th cranial nerves. Next is the general visceral efferent component, and the cranial nerves dealing with this function are 3, 7, 9 and 10. A ring of Westphal nucleus belongs to 3rd cranial nerve, superior salivatory nucleus belongs to 7th cranial nerve, inferior salivatory nucleus belongs to 9th cranial nerve, and dorsal vagus nucleus belongs to the 10th cranial nerve. Now the last component, that is a special somatic afferent component. This component is about vision, performed by the cranial nerve number 2, optic nerve, and hearing and balance, that is performed by the cranial nerve number 8, vestibulocochlear nerve. Ganglion cell layer is the nucleus of the second cranial nerve. Cochlear nucleus is the nucleus of the 8th cranial nerve for the function of hearing, and vestibular nucleus is also the nucleus of the 8th cranial nerve for the function of the balance. Now I will summarize the nuclei in another way. Cranial nerve wise, cranial nerve, component and the nuclei. Look at here, these are the pure motor cranial nerves, and pure motor cranial nerves are 3, 4, 6 and 12. Third cranial nerve has got two components, genusmatic efferent and genus visceral efferent. Oculomotor nucleus for genusmatic efferent function and Dinger Westphal nucleus for general visceral efferent nucleus. Then cranial nerve number 4, 6 and 12 has got only the genusmatic efferent component. Fourth nerve nucleus is the trochlear nucleus, sixth nerve nucleus is the abducent nucleus, and 12th nerve nucleus is the hypoglossal nucleus. Now the cranial nerves that are pure sensory. Pure sensory cranial nerves are cranial nerve number 1, 2, 8. First cranial nerve, that is the olfactory nerve. The function is special visceral afferent and the nucleus is bipolar neuron. Second cranial nerve, optic nerve, the function is special somatic afferent and the nucleus is ganglion cell layer. Eighth cranial nerve, the function is special somatic afferent and the nucleus are cochlear nucleus and the vestibular nucleus. And now the mixed nerves that are sensory as well as the motor. The mixed cranial nerves are the cranial nerve number 5, 7, 9 and 10. The fifth cranial nerve has got two functions, genusmatic afferent and genusmatic efferent. For genusmatic afferent, it has got spinal trigeminal nucleus, mesencephalic nucleus and main sensory nucleus. For genusmatic efferent component, the nucleus is the masticatory nucleus. Then is the seventh cranial nerve, which has got four components, four functions. For genusmatic afferent component, it has got nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. For special visceral afferent component, the nucleus is the gustatory nucleus. For special visceral efferent component, the nucleus is the facial nucleus. And for its general visceral efferent autonomic nervous system, the nucleus is the superior salivatory nucleus. Then is the ninth cranial nerve. It has got 5 functions. For geniospastic afferent, the nucleus are same as the trigeminal nerve. For general visual afferent, it has got the solitary nucleus. For spatial visual afferent, it has got the gustatory nucleus. For spatial visual efferent, the nucleus is ambiguous nucleus. For general visual efferent, the nucleus is the inferior salivatory nucleus. Then the 10th cranial nerve, it has got 5 functions, same as the ninth cranial nerve. The difference is only the nucleus of the general visual efferent component, that is the dorsal vagus nucleus. Otherwise, the nuclei of the ninth cranial nerve and the 10th cranial nerve are the same. Now note down important numbers of the cranial nerves. Memorize these numbers. This will help you a lot. First of all, cranial nerve number 1, 2 and 8. These nerves are pure sensory nerves. Then cranial nerve number 3, 4, 6 and 12. These nerves are pure motor nerves. Then cranial nerve number 5, 7, 9, 10. These nerves are mixed nerve, both motor and sensory functions. 5, 7, 9, 10 are also the nerves of the spatial visual efferent component, that is the brachial arch muscles. Then is the 3, 7, 9, 10. These cranial nerves deal with the general visual efferent component and the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system.